Hello, everyone. Welcome to CSOs on the Go. My name is CSO Vivian, CSO standing for Chief Science Officer. And today, on today's adventure, we will be interviewing Miss Judy Betancur. She works as a marketing manager for the Americas at Dupont. So welcome, Judy. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for having me. Very happy to be here.
Yes, thank you. So just to start off the interview, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and how you grew up, like the area you grew up around and just things that influenced you throughout life?
Yes, so thank you for the opportunity. I was born and raised in Colombia, and I grew up in a very nice family. I am the oldest of four. My education was always in Catholic school, so it was very conservative, if you will, always in a school from kindergarten to high school, actually, in a Catholic school with, only girls. So very, very traditional in that way. And that was, that influenced me later on making some decisions as well. But yes, after I finished high school, I decided to pursue, I really didn't know what to do at that point. I was not sure. I was not that keen into STEM because I didn't have a lot of role models in STEM at that time. I had a couple of aunts and uncles that were in, one was chemist and the other was mathematician and worked as a teacher, but there were not engineers in my family, for instance. My father was a lawyer, and I didn't want to be a lawyer for sure. I mean, I saw him reading a lot of books at that time. It's like, this is overwhelming. And he was also preparing all these speeches for litigations and things. I knew that I didn't want to do that. So anyways, kind of making the long story short, I decided to study chemical engineering. So I did my bachelor in science in chemical engineering. And when I graduated, I worked for 4 years in Colombia. And then I decided to pursue my master's in business administration and leave the country back then and come to the United States to study my master's. Then after 2 years of full-time study, I joined a multinational company that, which was my first job here in chemical specialty products.
Thank you. Thank you for the answer. So I know that you said that you just mentioned that you had aunts and uncles and just different in different areas and fields, and you also grew up as the eldest of 4 children. So did I, or so am I. I'm the oldest of 4 children, so we can relate there. How do you think that that has influenced your decision to become an engineer? Because like you said, there's no other engineers in your family that you knew. So how did that influence you to choose that path?
Oh, it was interesting because I actually didn't choose chemical engineering as that was not my first choice. So I remember I mentioned I grew up in a Catholic school, and that would influence some of my decisions. So my first decision to choose a career was really based on choosing kind of the environment that I was comfortable in. And I went more for the environment than the actual career. And I decided to go and study architecture, believe it or not. And this was because the university was, familiar to me. It felt like a smaller environment. And I felt more comfortable there. And it ended up to be that I was not for that. I studied for 1 year, so they basically go by semesters. So I went through my first semester, and my second, I did enjoy the math-related topics because I always liked math, but I didn't do well in the design ones and those that were more subjective. So I do remember having to. I remember enjoying the math piece. I don't remember enjoying kind of the subjective way in which some of my work was judged. And at least during those first semesters, things were very abstract in my mind, and I liked math because it was exact, right? It was a kind of, there's an answer, and I liked that. So after a year, I went to my family and said, this is not for me, clearly. I really always appreciated my parents' response on, hey, there's no such thing as lost time. You learned a lot, and I totally agree with that. So after that, the time had passed for me to apply to another another career, another university. And so I dedicated 6 months to study English in the meantime, which after all, it served me well later, who knew? And so after the time came, I decided to apply for chemical engineering, which was one of the subjects that really, in which I performed well in school, and was related to a more exact, as I call it, kind of science. So that's how I made my decision, and clearly the way I grew up influenced how, you know, the decisions I made, sometimes for good, sometimes you just make mistakes in correct course. And I feel very happy about that time that I spent there as well. I also learned a lot from that experience.
Right, definitely. I don't really hear too often people say that there's no such thing as lost time, but definitely I agree. As long as you're learning something, it's sticking with you, and even if the information doesn't stick with you, likely your how do I say this? Your
experience going through
Yes,
school,
your
right? I mean, I
experience,
always,
your abilities.
exactly, I agree with you. I think that no matter what you choose to study, when you go through your college years, you're learning a lot more than the professional field. And what is interesting is that when you go and work in any company, I would say probably equally valuable is your professional formation than your ability to solve problems, your ability to, you know, recover from a setback, your ability to work in teams, your ability to solve conflicts with your team members, ask for help, ask questions. Is for me, it is for me tough and sometimes painful to hear some people saying that their studies didn't give them anything, or they lost time, because in my opinion, it's a lot more about than just the study itself.
Right.
And that really pays off when you're out there in the workplace.
Yeah. And also, I definitely can relate with you on how you said that you like the more objective things like math. There's always an answer. 1 + 1 is always going to be 2. But maybe in subjects like literature or even art or design, I definitely felt, or I could understand that so kind of confusion, like why, like how come it's so subjective? But things like that, you know, there's not always a sure answer. So I probably would have done the same thing and moved to something that was more objective and firm. So,
Yes. You know what is interesting as well, that after the years, what you find out when you're really in the work, working with teams is, yes, you need also that exact answer from someone, but the decisions are not made with perfect information. So at the end of the day, no matter where you go, you can work in a pharmaceutical, you can work in a chemical company, you work in an NGO, you work in medicine, right? Look at the vaccines that have been developed. I mean, if you need a lot of data and information to make a decision. And yes, you need the person that comes with the data, the exact number. But then at the end of the day, you all get together as a team, and a decision is made based on limited resources, scarce resources. Usually there's never all that you want, right? On the background that everyone brings, on the ability to say that vaccine, to transport that vaccine, to how to deploy it, etc. So there's always that exact data point, and I think we're in agreement that science gives you that, and you need that person as well at the end. That's key input to a collection of inputs that are not exact. All of them are known, right? You make assumptions and you make decisions and you move on.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that piece of advice, because it can be sometimes hard to differentiate which path you should take. Was it the subjective one, the objective one? But really, it's good to even have a combination of both, like you said, because we've been hearing a lot of things about vaccine trials and stuff. Like, it's very important to look at the numbers as well as how those numbers are affecting people. Maybe there's a difference, and you have to make that decision based on what you know previously. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
So another question, you mentioned earlier that after your career in architecture, or after your studies in that, after you left that, you still went ahead and began to study English. So do you mind describing where exactly this was? I know you mentioned before where you grew up, but where this was and where your school was, and how this experience was for you.
Yeah, so when I was still in Colombia, in Medellin, Colombia, that's where I grew up. And so I subscribed to one of the better institutes that was available to me in town. And I went every day. And for 6 months, the method that this school offered was audiovisual. So they will have some slides in there and they make you pretend you're having a normal day dialogue. And so they, of course, would correct what you said, right or wrong. So that was for 6 months. It really helped me. And I really discovered how much I really loved English. Like it was not that difficult for me, although I need to say that you're exposed to English since you're a child in Colombia, because we watch movies in English, right? And you're reading all the time in the movies, right? In the movie theater, we're all the time reading, but you're listening all the time. You're listening English here and there, right? The songs we used to sing without knowing what we were saying. So this is very common. So you're used to listen to English, and there's some English words that we use frequently there, and more so now than before. But those 6 months were of a lot of learning. I had to really feel very comfortable with the fact that everyone was going to college, and I was not at that time. 6 months taking my bus to my class and coming back, but I just felt great knowing that I was learning something new every day. And at the end of the day, it really helped me. And later on, as we study chemical engineer, there's many textbooks that you're exposed to in English. So you go do research, and you go to the library, and you go and read and do your research in English books. So you then start a lot more exposure there. And then my first job was with a distributor of multinational here. So I used to have dialogues, emails, exchanges with Americans, with British. I used to be a host for them when they came and visited customers with me, because I was in sales. I was in specialty chemical sales when I started my career. So, and I also came to the US for trainings. So that helped me further improve my broken English at that time, and improve my English. But certainly that time gave me a very good foundation.
Wow, I think it's really important that you took that extra step. No one told you or no one forced you to study English, but it definitely gave you a heads up or an extra head in this field of chemical engineering. And so you did mention in that answer that you were in sales in chemical engineering at one point. Do you mind describing what that was like?
Yes. So when I graduated as a chemical engineer, all that usually everyone thinks when graduates as an engineer is that you're right away going in and going to a plant with your helmet and your boots, and you're going to work as an engineer. And that's what I was thinking. And then one of my friends at school said they are recruiting for a sales job in this company. And I'm like, sales? I'm an engineer. I'm not going to sales. And but I went to the interview, and they offered me the job. And this was a company representing Dupont, actually, in Colombia. And so being an agent for their specialty chemical products. And they were looking for engineers to do that job. So what it happens to be that they want engineers, or at least people with the knowledge in chemistry, to be able to sell these specialty products, because you need to interpret the customer needs. And your customers are people injecting plastics in a plant, extruding elastomers, or treating textiles. And there's chemistry involved in all that you sell. So just the fact that you had that knowledge, the lingo, the ability to translate and interpret was needed. So I decided to take the job, and I absolutely loved it. And I think that led me where I am, where I then transitioned to marketing role where I am, but I was for many years in sales. And the experience was great because I would, as I said before, host some of my colleagues, Americans colleagues, and we would go to plants and see the process working there, see how my product worked actually in the field being used, the problems that were generated, how the technical person would solve them, and the ability to communicate the value proposition associated with that product for me as a salesperson was key. So the background just gave me the ability to be able to sell those type of products. And then I went into marketing. Now I need to develop those value propositions so others can sell it. And the fact that I was in sales also helped me with credibility with my colleagues in sales today for in what I share with them, what I ask them, our conversation with our customers, etc. So yes, that the sales field was a great experience, and they were looking for this type of STEM backgrounds for that, and they still do.
Wow. So would you say that the marketing background is different than sales? Because in my opinion, or from what I would automatically assume had I not known, or maybe what the listeners or viewers may be assuming, is that they're kind of the same. Like sales and marketing, they sound the same. Do you mind explaining the difference between those, like a firm difference between them?
Absolutely. So in marketing, and there are different types of marketing as well, believe it or not. So even the marketing field is divided in different fields. So there's people in marketing that are thinking long term, what is the next new product in 10 years from now, right? So that's called more from a strategic marketing, right? Or new business development. Some others are thinking on the 5 years term. What is what we're going to sell in 5 years? And the others are more like supporting more closer to the sales job, which is selling what we have today, right? In all those different types of marketing, the sales role is very important because they are the ones closer to the customer and understanding the customer problems. They are the ones like the ears and eyes of the company in the marketplace, listening to what problem the customer is having, because we may be able to resolve it, whether with a product that we have today and or applying some types of modifications to that product, or maybe achieving some type of regulatory approval to be able to participate in that market with what we have. Or it may be that we need to start from scratch developing a new product where now research and development gets involved, our scientists, right, our chemists, our microbiologists, depending on the field you're working on, right? So so they're very related because they both need to be fed from the customer need. But marketing is the one kind of gathering all that, putting it together with our capabilities, right? You sometimes want to solve the problem, but your company doesn't have a core competence on that specific issue. So so putting it together with the regulatory environment, with the capabilities of the company, gaining approval for some programs, budgets, right? And people to work on certain programs. So you're building the business case. And then you develop, once you have a product closer to market, you need to have as marketing, you need to have a very clear value proposition for the sales to take it over and sell it in the marketplace. So they're again, they need to work together, just like any other functions that I mentioned: regulatory, technical, R&D, lawyers, a lot of people, but they're very focused on very different things in their day-to-day.
Awesome, thank you. So from what I understood as like a summary is that sales people are more close to the buyers or to the people who are actually concerned with the product or who have the problem. In marketing, they kind of deal with the not so much background, but kind of getting that stuff put together for getting ready for the salespeople. Is that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. Although I want to emphasize, marketing could not do any job without understanding what the customer needs. So we very frequently we travel with the account managers. We go to trade shows together to hear the customer needs. There's no development, scientific work, or regulatory activity you can do without understanding the real problem out there. So you're kind of at this link in between the need and looking for a solution, and then conveying the message and launching the product, etc.
Okay, that's interesting. So you did mention in your comment that you go to trade shows, and that kind of brings up my next question, which was, how often do you see yourself traveling, and for how long, and like where to? Where do you travel?
Yes, so clearly these are different times, right? So we're not traveling right now, but
Right.
pre-COVID, in my role as America's marketing, I would probably be traveling once a month within the United States, and maybe, I would say maybe 3 times a year outside of the country, because my region is America. So I would go to Mexico, Brazil, and Colombia, and maybe a trade show or a training would take me to somewhere in Europe. In the past, I used to have a global role, and so I traveled to many countries during that job. Yes, many countries in Europe. Had an amazing opportunity to travel to Saudi Arabia, which was a totally different experience. Like everyone, like women, it's just, I had to train myself to make sure I respected the culture and understood. So many new experience. And I think this type of jobs and positions, and not only being in marketing or sales, our people in technical fields have the opportunity in this type of companies to travel a lot. And that's beautiful, because you get to learn how other people live, and really to kind of get out of a little bit of your bubble and make you understand other different backgrounds, and issues and problems and opportunities and nice things. So yeah, that's usually how the travel work. Now it's pretty much from home, of course, as you can imagine.
Right, definitely. During these times, fortunately, that's what we're like. But I definitely think it's interesting that you get to travel outside of the country even, and get to experience different cultures, and see what they're like. That's something I would definitely enjoy doing, or I would love to do. With that being said, how long would a project normally take? What would you describe the timeline to be like?
Wow. So in my job, I have many different projects going on at the same time, right? So some of them are short term and some of them are long term. So it's very important to the dialogue that I have every year with my supervisor to list my objectives for the year, right? So in those objectives, there's usually, say, develop some type of strategy for X market, and I have all year to do that, right? So it's up to me to kind of divide up my work and carve out time for that work as I go, right? But others are immediate, like we need something for next week, so you need to be more, you need to rush a little bit for that. So I think time management is key on that. I mean, being organized, I think, is something that I would recommend everyone. Of course, it's easier for some than others, but always keeping track of where you are, your objectives, the expectations that are, your expectations and your supervisor's expectations, the companies, right? It's always good to have it clear. But to make sure I answer your question, so if you're going to say in our field, if you're developing a new product totally from scratch, just because our field is regulated, there's projects that could take 10 years. So you start, or you get into the project in the middle of it and started 5 years ago, or you're lucky to be at the end, right? And when you are in the capacity to offer, say, the market a project or a product that exists, but you had to just include minor modifications specifications or obtain some regulatory approval or something like that, then it could be a project that lasts 2 years. And then clearly there's a lot of things that have, like, as I said, more immediate things that you need to deliver in a month. Not a product, but not a product per se, a technology, clearly, but a deliverable, say a document, a study, an opinion or something, a recommendation on ways to take. And as I was referring before, a lot of decisions are made with imperfect information, getting together with people, with your team, listening from everyone, and making decisions. Decision making is very important at the end of the day. You gather what you have, you make your assumptions based on the feedback of everyone, and you need to keep moving, and you cannot stop there. You can just, you're never gonna have perfect, an exact answer,
Right.
like in math, a perfect decision, but that's life, right?
Yes, definitely. And you did mention that there are some projects that, people request to be done in as little as a week. And, but you also did mention that you have a team. So for those smaller projects, do you still work with your teams on those, or are those more independent? And like, how much pressure does that put on you, depending on who works with you and who doesn't?
Yes, it depends. I mean, something that I really liked when I pursue my chemical engineering and my work, even in college, was that I had the opportunity to work in teams, but I also had the opportunity to work by myself. I like to sit down myself alone and walk through the information, make sense of the things I have available, do my math. I cannot like do math in public. Like, I just don't. Some people are very comfortable with that. I'm like, wait a minute, I need my Excel spreadsheet, or just let me go through my. So I think you need a good balance of both. I personally feel that I want to gather my information first. And if I'm leading that project, I will provide a background to the team, have them together, summarize for them what we're looking for, and listen. And listen to, usually what I really try to bring a proposal, like based on what I'm hearing, this is what I see, or there's 2-3 different paths here. What do you guys think? Because sometimes when you come with no proposal, then the conversations become very long. So then you're not that productive, and it's not that you're not listening, it's just you're giving some options, and you need to be totally open. Are there things I'm not considering here, right? So I like to bring the background, summarize it in a way that is understandable to everyone in a short period of time, and then have a discussion. And then the important thing follows, which is listening a lot, listening and not having your preconceptions of things, your conclusions set up, just listening because everyone brings their own experience, background, or things that happened in the past that you're not aware of. But I try to facilitate those projects by bringing background, doing alone time first, bringing background, bringing potential paths, some prospect decisions, and then listen so we can make a quick decision.
Definitely. I think that was really important that you gave us a little outline of how a good productive conversation should go and a good productive plan should go. Because honestly, if you don't have a sturdy subject and if you don't have a plan up front, it's not likely to go very far, especially not that day. So thank you for that answer. But moving on from that kind of area or topic, how would you describe the diversity that you see in the engineering community as far as people who are like you, who are Hispanic, or other minorities? How much of that do you see today in your field?
Yes, growing up in Colombia, I remember graduating as a chemical engineer in a group where half of us were women. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, so I came to this country and I'm like, why? Of course, there's a lot more people and there's a lot more options. That's the thing, people can work in so many fields. There's so many opportunities in this country to do so many things, right? I feel like in our country, or at least for me, there was not a question of you're going to college now. It was more like, what are you going to do for college, right? It was not a question. So you're always thinking, about those options. But here, clearly, I mean, the Hispanic population is not represented properly, or I see that it's improving, and we're doing a lot of work to improve it in Dupont and all the companies that I worked for in the US. I've always been part of the Latin network. So for us, it's the Dupont Latin network. And we do work with the community, with kids, to expose them to STEM programs, to science experiments, to show them that science is fun, and things like that. And so we try to really influence these decisions and at least expose them to these fields. But when you look at we always look at the statistics, and clearly, the people in not even only STEM, just the representation of Hispanics is not there, it's not aligned at all with the population of this country. So there's a lot of work to do. I am very confident that these programs that what we're doing right here influence people that help change or accelerate that growth rate on Hispanics in STEM, women, STEM, minorities in general, and kind of balance out a little bit more. Because, as I said, when you're working in team, you want different perspectives. That's key.
Right.
That's key. And if you have all people looking the same or coming from the different place, discussing one topic, guess what? You're gonna probably have the same answer, not many alternatives to look at, not many different perspectives, and okay, good, but your customer doesn't look like you. It's as simple as that. Your product, and we always have a customer. Call it a patient of a medicine, call it a user of a vehicle that needs, and the vehicle needs parts that are made by, so there's always a customer. There's always out there someone that is using our product, and ideally you want to look, or at least understand how that customer think and how they make decisions, and that's only possible with diversity present.
Yes, I definitely agree. There needs to be a lot more exposure of STEM to minorities and, different people who aren't necessarily represented as much in those fields. It's the only way that we can actually make a difference and have it positively affect everyone and have everyone be represented. So thank you for emphasizing that. And I hope that that's something that these viewers can pick up on. So we're almost out of time, but we have one final question for you, which is, if you could give us any piece of advice throughout your whole career and things that you've learned, maybe it's something you learned as a really young person, what would it be?
Well, I would say if you have very clear what you want to do, you're very lucky. That's great. Maybe because you have people in your family and you had a big influence and exposure to that field. That's great. Talk to them a lot. Try to ask them to go to work with them one day. Be exposed to what it looks like, right? So don't underestimate the power of groups and associations that take you there, right? So you are starting to build relationships. If you are like me, that didn't have a clue what to study, or at least were a little lost, don't feel bad at all. Don't feel bad if you feel like you want to be an artist one day and then you want to be a doctor. It happens, right? It happens. At the end of the day, just make a list of things that seem like things you like to do. Talk to people a lot. Ask a lot of questions and listen. to listen to their response, all right? So sometimes we're just asking questions and we want to talk and we don't listen. So talk to people that are in those possible fields. What do you do on a daily basis? Believe it or not, people love to talk about themselves. You know, people really want to contribute. They welcome those questions, the professionals out there, and they're willing to take you to a day of work or to expose you to how it looks like. So ask questions and try to be exposed. And something that is, I think is very important, everyone can do this, no matter in which grade or what point of their career study is welcome teamwork. Encourage teamwork and try to feel comfortable in that environment. I need to say that I remember sometimes in college when, okay, that homework, yes, I want to work on that project and whatever. And then they say, okay, you need to get together with 2, 3, 4 people. And like, I want to work on it myself. Like I probably do it faster. I know, and sometimes you feel like you end up doing all the work, or sometimes, someone would help or 2 of you would do all the work. But what I want to say is that, the work out there when you're actually working in your career is about teamwork. As I said, alone work, of course, you always need to have that, but a lot, the decisions are not made by one person. I mean, I still haven't seen any award that was won by one person that did all the work, or a product that was launched by one person, or something that was discovered by one person. There's no such a thing. There's always a lot of people involved in anything you do. So you need to be able to manage those relationships, good or bad. Actually, if you have conflicts right now, great. Learn to deal with that conflict, because you're going to encounter that out there. So right now the stakes are not as high. Practice that. Practice how to manage with your colleague. Hey, I didn't appreciate what happened here. How do we correct this? Because you're going to deal with that. So I think that's something you can do right now, is to listen a lot, ask a lot of questions, and welcome. And I know sometimes it's not that nice, but teamwork, and try to solve those problems, and rehearse influencing others to, towards a decision, and persuade them something, right? And this is the time to do it, because it's the real world. So I hope this is helpful for you. And this was very, very nice conversation we had here.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for the answer. So just to put it out there again, recommendations from Judy is to work together. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and don't be afraid to delegate roles to different people. That's really important in our younger ages, so that we can get used to it in our real fields. And also listen to people. You want to be able to get different perspectives. Like she said, you want to be able to satisfy the entire diverse community, and not just people who look like you. And last but not least, it's okay if you don't know where you're going right now, but hopefully Judy inspired you with her career in chemical engineering. Once again, thank you for coming. We really, really appreciate having you here. And this was just a great interview. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Same for me. I appreciate the time.
Thank you so much. All right. That's all we have for CSOs on the go.